Anwar Mhajne is an assistant professor of political science and international studies and joins us live from Boston. We're coming up for 3 months since this conflict started. Do you worry how normalised the sheer devastation, the death, the suffering have become? And what impact does that have, both, of course, for people in Gaza, but also people who are looking at these pictures every day?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a fear that is common also among Gazans who are always asking, do not forget about us. Are these videos becoming normalized? Are people not noticing us? Are not paying attention to these stories? Are they becoming so normal that nobody's pressuring their governments to do anything about it? And that's very concerning because we know, especially in the case of the US, domestic pressure is very, very important to push the administration to take a more a strict response or strict approach to Israel and try to pressure it to pause the war or try to move on to whatever the next phase is that is lower intensity. So we will see what happens. But I know sometimes passing a resolution asking for humanitarian aid and some pauses, that will give the U.S. more time and gives Israel more time to continue with its operation under the umbrella of providing humanitarian aid, because if the death toll is not like it was in the thousands, so we're okay with hundreds now, and people are getting some food, but we don't know how much is getting in and how it's getting in, then that gives Israel some leeway and the U.S. some leeway to say, oh, the fighting could continue.
And of course, nobody's arguing anything other than that the situation in Gaza is extremely serious. But precisely because of what's going on, because of power cuts, neighborhoods completely cut off and so on, how hard is it to get accurate and up-to-date information out of Gaza about what's happening to people and to where they live?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know international journalists haven't been able to really access and cover what's happening on the ground. We see a lot of local journalists and reporters covering that. But even then, we see that they're having issues because communication has been cut off a few times in the past few months. We know Mu'taz, who has a large following on Instagram and Twitter, but he also is struggling to cover what's happening. We know more than 60 journalists who are important for covering the news and bringing the stories of Gazans to the outer world have been targeted. We know over 60 journalists have been killed, including, as we saw, the Al Jazeera reporter who actually had his family killed while he was on live TV. So it's making it also very dangerous for journalists to cover what's happening on the ground. And if you're starving, if you're trying to maintain to stay safe, then that even makes it harder to cover what's happening on the ground. And the less images that we get from the ground and knowledge of what's happening on the ground, the harder it is to really ask for a ceasefire and push for it, and for us to mobilize public opinion and mobilize people to pressure their governments to push for a ceasefire.
Okay, Anwar Mhajne, live for us from Boston in the United States. Many thanks for joining us.